we can proceed.
Thank you. Can I start?
Yes.
Hey, good morning, good day, and good afternoon to all participants wherever in the world you may be joining us from. This is the third year that the University of KwaZulu-Natal, with its civil society partners, is hosting an online colloquium to commemorate International Restorative Justice Week, which this year runs from the 19th to the 25th of November. In the context of current geopolitical tensions, the climate crisis, and human rights abuses throughout the world, dialogues, mediation, and peacemaking using a restorative justice lens is more relevant than ever. We have a very interesting and youthful, might I say, lineup of speakers who will share their experiences and ideas on aspects such as the reintegration of offenders, community dialogues, and peacemaking in communities. Today's online colloquium aims to explore the significance of restorative justice and its transformative potential to positively influence all dimensions of society, from families to communities to individuals. By delving into the importance of including restorative justice in various ecosystems, we aim to highlight how peacemaking can impact schools, workplaces, legal systems, and communities at large. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to request at the outset that if you have any questions or comments, please post them on the chat. These will be addressed by the panel during the Q&A sessions, and we will open up the session for live questions as well. It now gives me great pleasure to call upon Professor Ernest Kgalema, who is very well placed to welcome you today. He is not only the Dean of the School of Built Environment and Development Studies within the discipline of community development, but actually a community developer at heart. Professor Kgalema.
Thank you, Dr. Hema Hagoven, and thank you, honored colleagues, members of civil society who are at the trenches, members of the legal fraternity, judiciary, particularly Honorable Judge Malopha Sithosa, who is here with us, who is a Justice of the High Court of the Republic, and other distinguished guests, community partners, students, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I welcome and acknowledge your presence this afternoon. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome you on this special day where reflection, sharing, and learning will occur. This sharing circle of knowledge holders gives us an opportunity to reflect on the work you have been embarked on for a while now. It is an absolute honor to have you at UKZN. Indeed, this is a special occasion for us in the university because it gives us time to reflect as we commemorate the International Restorative Justice Week with the theme, Repair and Reform, Restoring Dialogue, Solidarity, Justice in Today's Society. Colleagues, something is broken. Healing is needed. The world is in turmoil, but we also must acknowledge that brokenness. I think as the world is in turmoil, we have to reflect about our roles as practitioners, as knowledge holders, but also as activists on how we can make the world a better place for all of us. It is time for us to connect. It is time for us to act and positively affect and impact our world. As you know, the University of KwaZulu-Natal prides itself as the most transformed university in the former post-apartheid universities. At its core, learning is at its core. And we do that as part of our mandate to offer safe spaces and places where uncomfortable and almost comfortable conversations can occur. Critical conversations are at the heart of what we do. And I hope that today, with our partners, the coalition, we hope that this conversation will integrate meaningful ethical community engagement moving forward to enrich the experiences of our communities, to enrich the experiences of our students, but also the communities we serve. For us, this occasion is very, very important as we mark this day of the International Restorative Justice. So on behalf of all of us who have put this occasion together, particularly the School of Built Environment and Development Studies, the Discipline and the Department of Community Development, civil society engagers, leading organizations at the coalface, thank you for bringing us, all of us together. We acknowledge you as practitioners, and we value we value your presence today. On behalf of our VC, Professor Nana Poku, and our DVC, Professor Nhlanhla Mkhize, and the college executive in the College of Humanities, I would like to welcome you to this learning opportunity for all of us. Particularly, I want to thank Dr. Hema Hagoven for your leadership, the grace that you and humility of spirit that you have provided us so that we can all be together and bring us, all of us, in this sharing space. So thank you, and I hope that today will be a learning opportunity for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Kalema, and for those kind words. Ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to start the program, and it gives me the greatest pleasure to welcome and introduce you to our keynote speaker. It is really so refreshing to have young voices of change, and also for us to feel comfortable that the future is in good hands. I want to introduce Ms. Tamara Hofer, who has MSc BSc honors. She is a motivated and adaptable expert in penal reform. She uses an evidence-based approach to inform national and international prison research and strategy. And she has previously worked as a prison officer in England and Wales as a participant of Unlocked Graduates Program, a leadership scheme for outstanding graduates. As a frontline officer, Tamara made a difference in the lives of some of the most vulnerable people of our society and gained vast knowledge on reformation and reintegration. Tamara is applying her knowledge in penal reform and research to innovative solutions in supporting prisons, tackling staffing problems and poor prison conditions, affecting outcomes for incarcerated individuals and undermining the fundamental EU values and international principles, such as the Nelson Mandela rules, on which judicial cooperation on criminal matters is based. Additionally, Tamara is researching innovative solutions to reducing reoffending. As part of a professional career, Tamara has witnessed KULISA's initiatives in Alexandra. The title of her keynote address is Transforming Communities Through Dialogue, Peacemaking, and Social Justice, Reflections on the Alexandra Peacebuilding Program in Gauteng, South Africa. During her talk, she will reflect on how we can support formerly incarcerated individuals in integrating them into their communities, the Community Peacebuilding Project in Alexandra, and the power of lived experience. Over to you, Tamara.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hema Hagoven. It's truly an honor to be speaking to such an incredible audience today and to share my experiences of the integration of formerly incarcerated individuals with a restorative justice lens. Firstly, I would like to touch upon the fact that I used to be a prison officer and why I became a prison officer. It is said that no one truly knows a nation until one has been inside its jails. A nation should not be judged by how it treats its highest citizens, but its lowest ones. This is a quote by Nelson Mandela, which I often refer to when people ask me why I became a prison officer. Prisons can often be quite hidden places that society doesn't really see, whether they see it inside or outside of it. And society needs to understand the chances of prison to unlock potential and to transform lives. In my work as a prison officer, I've worked with some of the most vulnerable people of society, and I recognize the incredible need of supporting these incarcerated individuals in their social reintegration. And that work doesn't start in prison. That work starts way before prison. That work starts in the communities. That work starts in school when we give people education and opportunities to lead law-abiding lives. However, some people have not had those opportunities, and they perhaps will end up in prison. And when they do, prisons need to be changes and opportunities for transformation. This need is a holistic need, and it requires a multidisciplinary approach to prison work. And it also needs a new mindset as to what it means to be working inside a prison, but also what it means to welcome the released back into the community and into society. Since having worked as a prison officer, my mission has been understanding and supporting social reintegration and community engagement. I truly believe that even if we have the most fantastic prisons which are focused on rehabilitation and are extremely supportive, if society doesn't trust in these prisons and society doesn't welcome these individuals back after their prison sentences, we cannot achieve what we want to achieve within the prison environment. So I'm working towards answering the question, how can we support formerly incarcerated individuals in integrating into their communities post-release? As part of trying to answer this question, I came across COLLISA's work in Alexandra and their community peace building project. And I was really struck by their incredible enthusiasm to build a better environment, both mentally and physically, for the members of their community. I truly believe that what I've seen in COLLISA should be a practice that should not only be used in Alexandra, but internationally in all sorts of communities. Because what's at the heart of it is dialogue and restoration and understanding each other. So I would like to talk a little bit about what I've seen with COLLISA and what I've experienced, and then I would like to talk about the perceived impact from all the interactions I've had. So COLLISA has introduced me to several of their initiatives, one being the dialogue circles. Dialogue circles are held within the community center in Alexandra and are held with regards to different topics. So there's, for example, environmental justice, there's domestic violence, dialogue circles, dependent on what the community needs and what issues are currently arising. These dialogue circles are held by facilitators. These dialogue circles don't necessarily include incarcerated individuals, but formerly incarcerated individuals are welcome to them and can also give their input about what they think could support the community in reducing crime, because truly they will know best. Next, I've experienced mediations. And these mediations, the ones that I've been talking to people about, have been mainly about restoring family relationships. This is quite important because in restorative justice, there's obviously victim and offender mediations. However, quite often people tend to forget all the other relationships that might have been harmed through a person's criminal activity and through a person's incarceration. And this is exactly what COLLISA achieves with their mediations. They restore family relationships. They bring together people who have formerly been in good and supportive relationships, or even those who've never had those supportive relationships with their family members, but really need that support. And they support these mediations through trained facilitators who will give a space to dialogue, who will give the support of their knowledge to all the individuals who are part of it, whether that be the formerly incarcerated person or different family members. And it gives them a space to truly reflect on what has happened and how it impacted each other. Thirdly, COLLISA has shown me all their community engagement. So through their trained mediators and facilitators, they have incredibly high community engagement within Alexandra. This means that they are with the community at all times. They know exactly what the community is in need of, and they can advocate the needs of the community, mainly through the dialogue circles. And quite importantly, COLLISA uses a multidisciplinary approach to their community engagement. It's not that they only sit around in a circle and talk about what needs to change, but they will also engage in other things such as recreational activities for the communality of the group, and they will ensure that there's theatre and dancing opportunities and different courses such as sports as well. These are the things that I've seen as part of the project in Alexandra, and it has all been extremely engaging. And I've noticed how all the members of the community that I've been speaking to were incredibly grateful for KELISA's work. Now I'd like to talk more about the perceived impact of all these interventions and the work KELISA does. Firstly, KELISA creates an opportunity for open dialogues. One of the quotes that I remember quite vividly was a grandfather of a formerly incarcerated individual who said, "We need to cough it all out." And I thought that was quite apt for what's happening when somebody in your family has to go to prison and has committed a criminal crime. Because at that point, you sometimes have so much grief and anger and you don't know how to get rid of it. And unless you get to speak to that person and speak with mutual respect, and you also listen to each other and listen what's been happening, then you can truly cough it all out and get it all off your chest and then move forward in a restorative relationship. What I found most important is the mutual respect, though, in those open dialogues. What doesn't work is if parties come together and they just want to bring across their opinion and they do not want to listen to each other and they just want to blame somebody for whatever happened. What is needed is dialogue between people, and that mutual respect where people are able to not only express their opinion, express their feelings, but truly also listen to each other. And KELISA brings home the listening. Next, KELISA also visualizes change. Just for reference, out of a prison perspective, being able to show people on the outside that change is possible is incredibly difficult, especially because, as I said, prisons are very hidden places. Engagements such as KELISA's give opportunity to the community to visualize and truly see that change that has gone through a person, that a person can change from within, that a person needs support to change, but all of them are able to change if they truly want to and if they feel like they want to. So KELISA gives an opportunity for hope, not only for formerly incarcerated individuals, but also for the community. And mainly shows that change is possible. And once you believe that change is possible, once you truly can see the change within a person, you also are able to give more people more opportunities because you've seen that change once and you know that we can support others into moving towards that change. And I think that's one of the most foundational and important parts of KELISA's program, that they show that change. Additionally, they do community-based problem solving through the dialogue circles. Quite often, and we have this problem in the prison service in England and Wales, we don't listen to the people affected by our policies. We don't listen to the people who are truly living in the communities, in the society. We make decisions based on feelings, based on our own experiences. But KELISA says, no, in fact, we will listen to the people who truly know best. We will open dialogues and we will give them opportunity to problem solve. And each dialogue will have different topics. As I said earlier, they can choose the topics within the community, and KELISA provides ideas, but they do not push towards a solution, because at the end of the day, problem solving comes from within the community. And finally, another very, very important reflection, which I would like to expand on more, is the power of lived experience. The power of lived experience is something that COLLISA uses all the time in all of their restorative justice and community peace building projects. The power of lived experience means that we can listen and feel what people have gone through, understand why people have acted or reacted in certain ways, and thereby give them much more opportunity and see more potential in them. In penal research and in penal reform, we also have in the last couple of years started to look more into the power of lived experience and listen to the incarcerated individuals and formerly incarcerated individuals in trying to make their experiences count and in elevating what they have experienced in a way that we can change the current trajectory. Prison reform is an incredibly difficult thing to do. The very structure of prisons can be difficult to implement restorative justice in, by the very structure of the differences in power, the imbalances in power of the incarcerated individuals and prison officers like I used to be, and other members of staff in the prison. It is difficult to facilitate change. And this is exactly why we need community buy-in, and we need to work more together with the community to achieve the outcomes that we ought to achieve, that we're set off to achieve, because we cannot do it ourselves. We need to have structure in prisons that enables the individuals in our care to unlock their own potential, to drive their own change, to build their own opportunities. Because at the end of the day, prison infantilizes too much already. So we cannot start implementing so many programs, force people to participate. We need to pave the way that they can choose their own paths. And we can do that with the community engagement that COLLISA does. And we can do that with the community engagement that a lot of organizations do. But what we truly need is a bridge between incarcerated individuals and the community, not upon their release, but already prior to it. Because incarceration is one of the most infantilizing and damaging situations for individuals. Not only the lack of, the taking away their freedom, but also the lack of opportunities to see their families, the lack of opportunities to find employment after incarceration and during it, the lack of opportunities for housing upon release. All of these things that support an individual in their rehabilitation and support an individual in leading law-abiding lives. All these things need to be picked up way earlier than they currently are. We need to start supporting individuals from the first day of their incarceration into their release. And we need to do that with the support of the community. We cannot, as a prison service, be expected to do all of this if we do not get enough funding, because there's not enough community buy-in in the work we do. It is a two-way street. And we need to be supported in the things that we want to achieve equally as we want to support the community in their achievements and targets. So with regards to COLLISA's work, I want to really address the community and everyone in this webinar to make conscious choices in how we can support incarcerated individuals and how we can advocate for the support of incarcerated individuals and the formerly incarcerated. Because if we do not get together and if we do not advocate for those who often do not have a voice and are not given a space, then we cannot move forward in reducing reoffending and reducing crime ultimately. And this is why I am extremely grateful for the work that KALISA does, for the community engagement, and for the open dialogue and the opportunities that KALISA provides, not only for the formerly incarcerated, but for all the community members in Alexandra. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you. That was just absolutely wonderful to hear your reflections and your experiences of the KALISA program in Alexandra. It's actually, brings to the fore and highlights the cycle of crime, violence, and victimization, and the fact that offenders themselves are victims and their families are victims. And they're often victims of what happens in their own lives. And so one has to really look at it quite holistically. And this is very much the case in South Africa, where, structural inequalities and poverty has such a big role to play in crime and offending behavior. The importance of building that bridge between incarcerated individuals and the community is absolutely so important. And I think the role of civil society and government entities has a role to play in that. Thank you very much for those insights, Tamara. And I'm sure there will be quite a few questions coming your way, and we will then address that during the Q&A sessions. We now move on to the next speaker. It's Ms. Lesley-Ann van Salm and her team. And they will then provide further insights on the Alexandra Peacemaking Program. So KALISA Social Solutions, which we've all heard about a lot during Tamara's presentation, dates back to 1997, when Lesley-Ann, inspired by stories narrated by Credo Mutwa during the previous decades, in collaboration with the Departments of Correctional Services, Education, Community Safety, and Social Development, established the first ever offender rehabilitation program, which was introduced at Leeuwkop Prison, just outside Johannesburg. Today, KALISA operates throughout South Africa, and their mission is to address social vulnerabilities and inequalities by providing support and developmental know-how through key partnerships for initiatives at a community level that demonstrate social impact, inspires, empowers, and enables vulnerable children, youth, and the community at large. She will be joined by Mr. Africa Monyai, who has a degree in social sciences from the University of the Free State with majors in psychology and criminology. Mr. Monyai has research skills in social and behavioral sciences as well as Mr. Christopher Ndlovu, who works as a youth center manager at the Tusoni Youth Center. Thank you very much. Ms. Lesley-Ann van Salm, I hand over to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here with you, and I hope that lots of our colleagues and partners who've been working with KALISA over the years are celebrating this Restorative Justice Week with us. So just to start off with, I'm going to introduce you to my colleague, Africa, who's going to give you a very brief insight into Alexandra and the context of the Alexandra community, where we've been working now for over 23 years. So Africa, over to you to give a brief intro.
Thank you, Les. Thank you. Good afternoon, friends from South Africa and the other part of the world. Thank you for joining us today for this insightful colloquium. As Les stated, my name is Africa Monyai, and I'm privileged to speak to you from the heart of Alexandra Township, where I've been leading in establishing the KALISA Alex Peacemaking Project as a researcher and a project coordinator for over 2 years. Alexandra Township, known affectionately as Alex, is a vibrant and diverse community in the heart of Johannesburg, South Africa. However, like many townships with a population of approximately 900,000 residents crammed into a 7 square kilometer, just imagine a 7 square kilometer of about 900,000 residents, where in one yard you found about 30 or 10 or 15 households. So they are clustered, they are saturated, where there's no privacy. It has its own set of obstacles, which is poverty, unemployment, inadequate housing, and limited access to essential services are just a few of difficulties that our residents confront on a daily basis. These challenges have not only impacted the physical well-being of our community, but it has also taken a toll on our social fabric, leading to an increased tension, conflict, and a sense of hopelessness. It is against this backdrop that the Alex Peacemaking Project was born. This project aims to foster peace, harmony, and social cohesion within our community by addressing the root causes of conflict. So it deals with the root causes, not only the symptoms, but the root causes of conflict, and working towards sustainable solution. As a proud member of the COLLOQUIUM team, I have had the privilege of being on the front lines of this initiative, witnessing firsthand the transformative power of peacemaking. Being part of the Alex Peacemaking Project has provided me with a sense of purpose and fulfillment, knowing that I'm contributing to the betterment of my community. It has allowed me to build relationships with the remarkable individuals who call Alex their home, and together we have embarked on a journey of healing and understanding and reconciliation. Through our work, we have seen the positive ripple effect of peacemaking in action. What do I mean by positive ripple effect of peacemaking? Now, the community of Alexander, they've adopted this model. You know, as I said, it's only, we are saturated, we are clustered, meaning that in 1 yard, maybe 50 by 50 meters, we have about 30 households where they share one toilet, where they share one tap of water. So eventually, they'll always have conflict. They'll always try to fight. But now we are seeing this model now. The community, they have adopted it. Instead of fighting, they sit down in a cycle and they address the issues and they try to find out how can we do to resolve this issue. So it means that instead of the situation, it is prevented from being violent in the early stage. It has allowed me also to build a relationship with the Recamble, as I stated, who call Alex their home. And together we've embarked in healing and understanding and reconciliation. Through our work, we have seen positive ripple effect of peacemaking action. We have witnessed conflict resolved. I mean, conflict resolved. There's an incident in a school where the school was disorganized called Realogile, where a student actually stabbed the deputy principal. But we as Kulisa, we came in, we have dialogue cycles, and actually there was a reconciliation in the school. So conflict was seen and conflict being resolved, and relationship also being amended, and renewed sense of hope, sense of individuals to families, schools, and local businesses. We create an environment where everyone feels safe, valued, and empowered to build a brighter future by addressing the underlying issue that fuel conflict. In today's presentation, we will dive deeper into the challenges faced by Alex, explore the strategies and the intervention employed by the Alex Peacemaking Project, and hear stories of transformation directly from those whom this initiative has touched. Through our discussion today, you will understand the power of peacemaking and be inspired to take action in your communities. As a master trainer in running dialogue cycles, I have traveled to many parts of the country, training not only NGOs, but also corporates, as well as how to embed the principle of non-confrontational dialogue cycle in their everyday life. The evidence is in the impact. And thank you very much. And enjoy sharing our journey with us. Thank you very much. Thank you, Les.
Thank you, Africa. I think Les can take over. If you're going to be doing your presentation, I will introduce the topic. Otherwise, you can do it yourself. It's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm relying on my esteemed colleague, Mike, to help me with the presentation. So, Mike, if we can work together on this, please. So thank you very much. So we can move to the next slide. So I'd like to show you through our next slide that the COLLISA's deeply embedded experience in the field of restorative justice, and I won't go through all of these, but this just shows the trajectory of our, from our first rehabilitation program to running diversion programs, and then running public victim offender restorative justice events. But very, very excited that in 2004 we actually ran our first community-based restorative justice program in collaboration with Dr. Hema Hargovan, and that was a job program. And that job program has subsequently been rolled out throughout South Africa and being implemented through our different offices as part of our diversion and community peacemaking projects. So we're really excited about our history and also the experience that we've gained. So thank you very much, Mike. So there are different types of community peacemaking, and I also won't dwell on this too much, but basically we've got victim offender mediation, we've got family group conferencing, we've got circle sentencing, we've got restorative justice dialogue and dialogue circles, which is the emphasis of this being a very, very powerful and fundamental element of community development, and then also community conferencing. And these are different proven methods of peacemaking, which are well known in the restorative justice fraternity. Thank you, Mike. So the trends in restorative justice from a community setting, and this is based on international research, is that whereas previously restorative justice was very much within the criminal justice system, it's evolved now into a real tool in building community peacemaking. And so there's an increased focus on restorative justice and the need for community peacemaking. There's also an emphasis on community-led initiatives, and this is where COLLISA's deep passion lies, is capacitating NGOs to have agency and to take ownership of their own destiny by capacitating them. And that also links to how crucial it is that we look at intersectoral partnerships and also inclusivity. And my biggest challenge now and need is for different government departments to stop working in silos and to look how collaboratively we can really start having a huge impact if we look at a much more collaborative approach. And then also through restorative justice and through dialogue circles, by finding out the causal factors of why crime happened in the first place, we're actually able to address the systemic factors that really lead to adverse childhood experiences and set people on the route towards crime and criminality at such an early age. And that's such an important part, as Hema just said now. And then also there's such a movement now towards global networking and knowledge sharing, as we heard from Tamara, who came to COLLISA to learn from us from her own different global setting. Thanks, Mike. So in terms of our Alex Peacemaking projects, when it all started after the 2021 looting, when COLLISA decided, we've been operational in Alex, as I said, for 23 years, and we have an office, a very active office there. After the looting, we decided we had to get to the bottom of what were the causal factors of the looting, and let's find out from the community themselves, from the xenophobic victims, from the looters, from the victims, from those who had lost family members, from the shop owners, what triggered this, and what came out of that research, where we had open engagement over 430 community members, was the reality that in people in Alex, everybody's working in silos. And we then decided that what we would do is look at bringing different and diverse sectors of the community together. And there you can see all the demographics that we dealt with, and through the dialogue circle, all the different topics that we addressed. And through that, we ran 105 dialogue circles up to date, reaching 1,117 participants. But the key in this was that COLLISA trained the NGOs in the community to facilitate these dialogue circles. And that was, they went through a long training period, intensive training, learning all about restorative justice, collaboration, peacemaking, social cohesion, And they were only really independently commissioned to run these dialogue circles with a very strong M&E framework in August last year and running until November of this year. And I'm going to be showing you some of the amazing outcomes of capacitating our grassroots NGOs who, to a large extent, have remained invisible and have not been given the chance to really show the power that they have as community builders. So from the Peacemaking and Social Cohesion Program, the participants have, from irrefutable evidence, those who have been involved have shown various concepts and concerns, resulting in significant improvements in their everyday lives and emotional well-being, and that's include emotional, financial, physical, and recreational. They've all demonstrated an eagerness for continued dialogue circles. And they've described their experiences to summarize as educational, encouraging, enlightening, enjoyable, freeing, fun, good, happy, helpful, important, informative, lovely, mind-altering, relieving, therapeutic, and uplifting. Gee, this sounds like the solution to the whole world. And there you can see just how we've connected the dialogue circles there to the different elements of community development. Thanks, Mike. So from our Alex Peacemaking and Social Cohesion Program, these are from the analysis of the data, these are the different types of conflicts that we've dealt with. And what the outcomes have been is, people being able to talk about their anger and about bullying and crime, and how through communication they've been able to express themselves. They've had honest interaction. They've been able to listen. They've been able to open up. They've been able to share and talk. In terms of discrimination, we've got evidence of increased compassion, how they consider each other, how we've embraced cultural differences, equality, lack of judgment and respect for each other. And then in general, dropping peer pressure, substance abuse, definitely suicide and teenage pregnancy. And there's also been a sense of hope, healing, mental health, wonderful evidence of enhanced parent-child relationships. The self-awareness through the dialogue circles is people being able to be themselves, emotional intelligence, how they've been able to regulate their emotion, and then support. And this is the most important part that we found of all development, is for people to be able to connect. And through connection is finding the generosity, being able to help, people being inclusive, the loneliness being dealt with, the sense of belonging and teamwork. And if any element of our dialogue circles has really had an impact, it's been through connection and having voices and finding that unity in many diverse circumstances. So this is just feedback from two of our beneficiaries, our NGOs, who we asked them how the impact that they had felt of having the dialogue circles. And they've in turn rolled out many dialogue circles themselves. And just to add that, through running these dialogue circles, there's been an opportunity for our NGOs to be paid. Any dialogue circle that's been run for COLLISA, when there's data, we've paid them. And the reports that they submit to us have got to have very accurate data, otherwise they don't get paid. And we've got a whole information pack that's linked to running a dialogue circle, where the facilitator writes the report, and every single beneficiary evaluates the value, the facilitator, and highlights the value of what the dialogue circle has meant to them. And all of that information gets put into our central data bank and is analyzed by our research psychologist. And there's Chris at the bottom. I'm not going to highlight what he said because he's sitting right here next to me. So on to the next slide. Thank you. And again, this is, we've analyzed and gone through, as we said, over 1,000 voices, but this is really what peacemaking and dialogue circles achieve. And it's such a simple, wonderful way of breaking down the barriers, of building trust, conflict, resolving of conflict, encouraging to take action, enhanced understanding, increased communication skills. And I'll go down to reduce stereotyping and prejudice, strengthening community bonds. And my pictures, and that's really, these are, and all of this is from the data that we've actually gathered from all our different participants in our dialogue circles. Thanks, Mike. So what, again, from our, we commissioned last year a research psychologist to analyze what we conducted many different elements of research. So this is beyond the dialogue circles, but what we did is over 10,000 ALEX community members participated in various forms of research around mental wellness, about religion, about GBV, about exclusivity, about othering, etc. And we've developed an ecological model around dealing or looking at the risk factors for violence. And this ecological model shows that we cannot just look at working in a school and believing that engaging with school children and doing STEM subjects is going to work. Is that we're really looking at our whole ecology. And if we're ever going to have real impact, we need to look at all these issues that the community has come up with in terms of challenges and solutions. And this is why having intersectoral and systemic work and getting government to work with communities, getting the grassroots people empowered to be able to have ownership over their own future is so crucial. And I won't go into all these details, but you can just see the interconnectedness of all these challenges. And then unless we start looking at society and the broad factors that we need to do in society in general, what the community needs to do, the role of the schools, the workplaces, the lack of adequate, recreational facilities and relationships, how important it is to have good families, strong families, and have intimate partnerships and with friends and reduce gender-based violence. And then, of course, the individual people is, the history of GBV, etc. And one of the things I'd like to share with you is when I started working at Leeuwkop Prison, it will be 27 years ago in a couple of months. When we engaged in a dialogue circle with the offenders, I developed a philosophy in life, and that was, don't ask somebody what they did, but what happened to them. Unless we start looking, as Hema said, at the causal factors of why people are behaving in certain ways, we will never be able to heal our own society. We are through these risk factors in our society that have never been addressed in a collaborative way. We set our young kids out on a path to hell and destruction. And that's why we're seeing this escalating GBV, crimes increased, all the billions and billions of rands that have been invested. Where's the evidence? We've got no evidence that anything has worked. And this is why we've got to pull together. Thanks, Mike. So also with our data is we've looked and analyzed through our dialogue circles is what adverse childhood experiences, what in psychology they're called ACEs, what adverse childhood experiences people have gone through. And we've done this, there's an ACE, checklist, and this is done with adults, with old people, with young people. And in that checklist, we can say, what did you experience during your early childhood, even up to the age of 17 years? And when we look at the checklist of what people have been through in their early childhood, and that's through emotional, psychological abuse in the family, where there's been divorce or domestic violence, where they've been neglected through lack of love, where they've been abused, or where there's been sexual abuse. These adverse child experiences manifest or predispose the way that people think and behave. And this is why we have so much mayhem in our communities with people who have not been adequately developed, because from an early age, these adverse childhood experiences have led to the substance abuse, the mood disorders, the phobias, the insomnia, the anxiety. And we can trace back all the children who are involved in bullying, or all the young people who are involved in gangsterism. If we had to do an ACE check with them, you'll find that most of them from early childhood have been exposed to these different adverse childhood experiences. Thanks, Mike. So going on to Kalisa's absolute passion, and that is looking at how we need to capacitate NGOs. And there are so many thousands of NGOs in South Africa who've never had the opportunity to access funding, and that's because they don't have the right regulatory procedures in place. They don't have the right capacity, and we're really excited that every one of our NGOs and Alex have been through a full-scale training on policies and procedures and all the rules and regulations around running NGOs and budgeting. And this was done at the outset of our partnership with them. But we need the NGOs because they're flexible and they're able to respond at grassroots level. They've got solid connections with the community. They're able to advocate for their own marginalized groups. They're the bridge between government and civil society. They fill gaps in essential services that the government cannot provide. And they are at the forefront of social innovation. My experience in working with our NGOs and Alex, they have been my mentors. I've sat at their feet and I've learned so much from them. We don't do anything without asking them what their solutions to their problems are and where the capacity lies. So the richness of my learning from our Alex partners has been one of the highlights of my entire life. Thanks, Mike. And then just again is, if we get funding to these grassroots NGOs, that we need to support the development of networks. We can secure equipment for them. We can diversify their income sources, and we can establish robust M&E systems. So they too can be presenting to you the type of data that COLLIQUIUM is able to show now. And they have it all at their fingertips, but they just haven't had the right support, they haven't had the right funding, and they haven't had the right mentorship. Thanks, Mike. And then just before I hand over to my esteemed NGO partner, I call him I've got a family, and Alex is one of my key family members. These are the awards that COLLIQUIUM has won this year. And it's the majority of these awards have been based on our Alex project. And I just want to thank the people of Alexandra for the trust they've shown in COLLIQUIUM, that the support, the diligence. We've had hundreds of workshops. They've never failed to perform. And these are people who deserve, this trophy goes to them. And I just want to salute them. And I want to thank our donors and our partners who've allowed us to actually show how change is possible and how easy it is to replicate peacemaking amongst grassroots people in any community throughout South Africa. So now I'm going to hand you over to Chris, who is now sitting right next here to me.
Thank you, Les. Thank you so much. It is the first time for me to present in a webinar. It's a very exciting moment, and I'm so excited. We are learning every day. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to present on behalf of all NGOs involved in the COLLIQUIUM Alexandra Peacemaking at this critical gathering. My name is Chris Ndlovu from Tusong Youth Center. Tusong Youth Center is based in Alexandra Township. We work with children, teenagers, youth, ex-offenders, community as a whole. Our focus is on educational program, arts and culture, skills development, support, and mentorship. My role is to present to you the significant impact of the peacemaking project on our community. As we gather here for this online restorative justice colloquium with a focus of online colloquium on, it is crucial to recognize the importance of restorative justice and peacemaking approaches in addressing the challenges faced by our community. Allow me to share some specific examples of the project success. We run dialogue circles every Thursday, focusing on different age groups and different topics to help bring peace to our community. The school holidays was to help children to give their voice when it comes to GBV and how it affects them. We managed to reach out to 350 kids, both genders, who express their feeling and concerns about the GBV that is happening in their family and also in the community, including the schools. In June this year, we had different family cases for former incarcerated that needed mediation. I, as someone who's been trained, facilitator, and some of the other facilitators mediated different cases, and the outcome was very amazing on how families can go back together and live together as a functional families. As seen in this presentation, the positive impact of the project on our community cannot be underestimated. One of the most empowering aspects of our work It is ability to involve the community in restorative justice processes actively. The project has equipped individuals with the necessary skills for conflict resolutions, peacemaking, by providing training programs and workshops, which Les has already mentioned. The project has strengthened social cohesion in Alexandra, but what we have achieved is a mere drop in the ocean. We need support to scale and empower every agency, educational institution, NGO, and government department to embrace peacemaking as a way of life. This intervention has restored and strengthened relationships and trust among community members. Stories of the reconciliation and conflict resolution have become more common, fostering an environment of understanding and unity. We are determined to replicate our success in other communities, spreading the transformative power of restorative justice. We call upon all NGOs and stakeholders here today to embrace restorative justice in their work and advocate for its more comprehensive implementation. Together, we can build a more peaceful and just society. We have to reinvent the way we see one another. In closing, I would like to share the words of Nelson Mandela. Peace is not just the absence of conflict, but the creation of environment where all flourish regardless of race, religion, or background. I thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you to everybody. And I'm looking forward to engaging with you further. Go well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Leslie-Ann and your team. And, this was just phenomenal. It takes me back to the journey that started way back with the Justice and Restoration Program in Phoenix in KwaZulu-Natal, when we, conceived of community mediation. And we've been, you've been a partner to the university for many, many years hence. I just want to pick up a few things that you've highlighted in your presentation. And, it's something that, with me having come from criminology and from the legal side of things, and suddenly find myself sitting in community development and trying to find the links. And thank you for actually drawing all the links between restorative justice and community development principles and values. You've highlighted the power of citizenry, of solving problems and finding solutions. You've provided us with this community development perspective with an academic focus, which is very important for all those students and academia that are attending this online colloquium today. We need to understand as well how this can create opportunities for research. It brings home the notion that it is time for not for communities to try and get into academic spaces, but for universities and institutions to try and get into communities, because that's where the real learning takes place. So thank you very much, Leslie-Ann, and I really appreciate your, sharing all your learnings, your practice, your experience, and all the recommendations for change and for doing things better in the future. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's come to the time of the colloquium, where we welcome another very young and youthful participant, Miss Eleanor Tack. She holds a first-class Bachelor of Arts in International Relations from King's College London. Her professional experience is largely academic, working as a research assistant at the International Center for the Study of Radicalization and the Urban Violence Research Network. Her background is in immigration, having spent over 3 years working closely with migrants across the UK, France, and South Africa. Eleanor builds on experience working with clients from across the world, focusing on the human side of disputes and taking much of her inspiration from Marshall Rosenberg's theory of nonviolent communication. She trained with the Society of Mediators in 2018 and has since become a trustee of the society, assisting the faculty with training courses. The Society of Mediators is committed to transforming the landscape of dispute resolution by championing mediation as a powerful alternative to litigation. with a core mission to advance public education and promote the widespread use of mediation for the public benefit. The Society of Mediators has been a catalyst for positive change. Eleanor is involved in exploring the role of mediation as a means to address gang violence with a particular focus on Freetown, Sierra Leone, and Cape Town, South Africa, and has spent time representing the Xhosa community on the Wild Coast during mediations with local authorities while working with attorneys in Johannesburg. She is going to talk about community mediation in a restorative justice setting, why it is useful, and the need to formalize mediation training. The title of her presentation is Mediation as a Tool for Peace Building. Thank you very much, Eleanor, for sharing your experiences and knowledge with us. I hand over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to join such an esteemed panel of people. And I think every time I hear Les talk and the team from COLLIQUIUM, I'm always blown away by the amount of data that they've been able to collect and just the sheer scale of the impact that you've had in communities. And so I just want to nod again to Les, Chris, and Africa for everything you guys have done. And I know that Les is, anyone that's worked with Les will know that she's a very unique person, and she has this very unique ability to harness the potential in the people around her. So it's just incredible the work you guys have been doing. So I'm going to talk about community mediation. And I know Tamara touched upon the work that COLLIQUIUM has been doing with mediation. And Les, in her presentation, she highlighted two of the different sort of types of mediation in terms of victim-offender mediation and then also community mediation. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the latter. And it's focusing on family disputes is what my main work has been, but it is very transferable to different types of disputes in the community. So if I start with just a case study that I will speak about throughout. James was the eldest of 8 children. He was the only boy with 7 sisters to take care of. His father was an angry man and would often verbally, sometimes physically lash out at James when he came home from work. His mother avoided home to avoid the conflict between the two of them. One day, James's father had had enough, and he decided that James needed to move out. Over several weeks, they fought more and more, and these fights became increasingly violent. But James would not budge. He refused to move out of the family home. The pastor from their local church came to the house to try and help them resolve that dispute. And he sat with James's father and listened to why he thought James should no longer be in the home. He then sat with James and listened to why James thought he should not move out. All 3 of them then came together in what we call an open session. And the pastor, with their permission, summarized what had led James and his father to where they are today. And he summarized it in this way. He said, a sense of love and duty for the women in their family, and a fear that they could not protect them from hunger or danger. And that for both of them, there was this heavy pressure that they were feeling. And what the pastor did there was pull out the common threads that unified their conflict. But James and his father, they still disagreed as to whether James should move out or not. So that's a question I want you to reflect on. Does the fact that a solution was not reached at the end of this mediation render it a failure? I'll offer you one of my favorite quotes from Marshall Rosenberg to answer this question. All violence is the result of people tricking themselves into believing that their pain derives from other people's and that they consequently deserve to be punished as a result. To me, mediation in a community setting is not about finding a solution. It's about helping participants to hear one another. It's not about helping them tell their story, and it's not about creating a space for participants to listen just so that they can respond. The role of a community mediator is to hear what is alive in that person, That can be through their body language, through intuition, through feeling. It's not necessarily restricted just to the words that people use. Community mediators, their role is to then articulate what is alive in that participant to the other so that they can hear one another. There's no one-size-fits-all formula to achieve this. Mediations, I've seen them take a couple of hours, a full day, and I've seen them span over weeks with several sessions. They can consist of private sessions where it's just one participant and the mediator, or open sessions where it's all of the participants and the mediator, and it can be a mixture of those two. Once the participants have heard one another, it's up to them to decide what they want to do. And I think that really is the key to where restorative justice, or where mediation can come into restorative justice. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. And I'll touch upon what I think the power of mediation is, and then I'll talk specifically about the need to regulate and formalize mediation training like we've been doing with KALISA. So earlier this year, I attended one of KALISA's dialogue circles, and we had a training session in mediation. And as I said, there was this exceptional motivation to create peace and create change. And I think that is also at the heart of mediation, is that everybody there is voluntarily there and willing to participate. But I think it might be helpful to distinguish between dialogue circles and mediations. So a structured mediation and a dialogue circle, they're both quite flexible. Whoever is facilitating that in terms of the structure can adapt that to whoever they're working with. But I think what distinguishes the two is that a mediation has an issue which it's surrounded on. And it can be, some people say, solution focused because it's got that issue and they want to resolve the answer to that issue. But I think that's what distinguishes it from a dialogue circle, which is about sharing. And you might have a broad topic, but you don't have something that you want to address specifically in terms of a very concrete, tangible example. And I think in terms of the structure as well, mediations, they tend to be a little bit smaller, a smaller group size. And by virtue of having this unified issue, I think there's a lot more preparation in terms of speaking to the participants by themselves and objective setting, what they want to get out of that session in terms of the issue that it's surrounding on. And I think they both have their purposes. And I think sometimes a dialogue circle is way more appropriate than a mediation, certainly in terms of the situation or the, well, if we're talking about sexual assault or GBV in a community, that's very different to a family dispute in a very smaller setting. And I think mediation is often underused. I think it's often considered useful insofar as the soft skills that it can teach us. So something we explored in our training with KALISA was the use of tone, the use of language. And I remember I was talking a lot about this phrase, "I understand," and how that can be very destructive to a mediation. Skills in terms of reality testing, reframing what people say, playing devil's advocate, and using that to find golden threads, open, closed questions. All of these things are useful soft skills which come out of mediation and can be used in many different restorative justice processes and approaches. But I actually think the structure of mediation in of itself is a very powerful tool. I think one example is through having a very specific issue which is being addressed, it gives the participants, I think, easier scope to open up. So if you have participants in a room, say, for example, we take the example of James and his father, they've come into this room and they're talking about why they want James to move out or to stay in the family home. It's a lot easier for them to talk about that and provide content to the mediator because it's a very simple core issue. And as a mediator, you're then listening to what, not necessarily about that dispute, but what's going on around it. And anyone that does this type of work knows exactly that what people say is the main issue is never really the main issue. And it's exactly what Les said. It's about what's happened to them, what's going on in the wider context. And as a mediator, you have to find those golden threads. They may be saying one thing about how that they're angry that James comes home late at night after drinking. But what does that really mean? It doesn't feel like James is supporting in the home. So finding those golden threads, it's a lot easier when there's a core issue to be discussed and trying to resolve. And Marshall Rosenberg uses an example in a prison where one of the inmates was very angry at the prison guard because he didn't sign him up to a carpentry course. And he was very angry and sort of shouting at him about this. But when you pulled back the layers, what was really happening was that he was scared and upset because he was going to be released in a month and he didn't have any skills or training that he could use to gain income when he was out in the world again. So it wasn't actually about that core issue of him not signing up to the course and the prison guard failing to do that. It was about wider what that meant for him. I also think that by having a smaller group, it's easier to reality test and change mindsets in some ways. I think a clear example is if we have somebody who is perhaps having an issue with the housework in the home, so they're saying that that their wife isn't doing enough housework. That's a very core issue, and you can pick at that and say, well, why should they be doing the housework, and explore gender roles by focusing on that issue. And I think that enables people to reflect on themselves and the way they're thinking about that issue, rather than sitting down with somebody and saying, what do you think about gender? Or what do you think about roles? And it makes it a little easier for participants to understand and for you to be able to reality test them without attacking their sense of self and who they are, because you're focusing it on that issue. I think sometimes mediation can be confused with negotiation, and they're two very different things. I like to use a visual analogy to distinguish between the two. So imagine that there's two people and there's a wall between them. And I view negotiation as the negotiator helping one of the people climb through a window to get to the other person on the other side of that wall. Whereas for me, mediation, and community mediation in particular, is about cleaning the window just so that they can see each other. And then they can decide whether they want to climb through it, or they want to go downstairs and actually just walk through the door, or take a different approach entirely. And I think that's where the power of private sessions come in, because a lot of people in an open session, they don't fully want to be vulnerable and expose themselves. But all that preparatory work that you do with somebody, where it's just you and them, and you can test them, and you can create a very non-judgmental space where the person with whom they're having a dispute is not there. That's when you can really grasp what is alive in that person and what is going on for them. And I think sometimes you don't need to have an open session, or sometimes open sessions are really, really useful. And I've certainly had mediations where participants have come in and said, I'm not sitting in a room with that other person, like, no way. And that's okay. I think community mediation is about listening to the participants and how they want to structure it. And I think once you get this idea out of your head that it has to be solution focused, it takes the pressure off the mediator. And it does take the pressure off the participants too. I think one of the things I find most satisfying about community mediation in particular is you might not always find a solution, but you can see the effects afterwards. So when you do commercial mediation or sort of more commercial civil mediations, you'll find that people will stay in the room till 11 p.m. and they want to come out with a final hard answer at the end. Community mediation and people, because people are way more complex, you often don't have a solution at the end. You don't know whether or not James is going to move out. But 2 weeks later or a week later, those participants might see each other in the street, and the mediation has broken the ice, and they may be a little bit more pleasant to each other. or they may view that person differently. And I've seen occasions where people have come together a month later and they've started to continue the dialogue that was created in the mediation and found a solution, or they forget what they were even arguing about in the first place. And that's what I think is really cool about community mediation, and is very sustainable because it continues outside of the room when you're no longer there. So I could talk about community mediation for a long time because I think it's so fantastic. But I'll save that for Q&A. So I'll move on to sort of the formalization of mediation training. Currently, there isn't really any regulation at all for community mediators in South Africa. It's kind of part of the beauty of it is that the pastor from your local church or your neighbor can step in and help you resolve those disputes, and you can just dive straight in. But I think there are some risks that come without having formalized training of mediation. And the work that we did with Kalisa and that we're continuing to do highlighted for me the need to have formalized mediation training, because we've got all these incredible leaders who are so willing and so dedicated to resolving disputes, but perhaps need some tools or directions. And there's sort of two reasons, two broad groups. The first is the protection of the mediators themselves. And the second is the protection of the participants in that mediation. So if I talk about protecting the mediator, I think certainly at the Society of Mediators, I'm very much one of the youngest people there. We've got Jonathan Dingle, who created the organization, is now the CEO. He's got over like 20, 30, 40. I don't want to be too rude. Very, very many years of mediation experience. And through this, we've developed tools which we can give people. And these are practical safeguards. So community mediation, for example, always should be done with two mediators. And quite often, a male and a female mediator. And I think that helps in terms of different perspectives, in terms of safeguarding, but also the protection of the mediators themselves. There's little things about how you set up the room, all of these sort of practical approaches that should be in the mind of people when they are setting up a mediation. And that can just be addressed in a handbook or addressed in formalized training, which I think a lot of people don't think about. And one of the things that really struck me about our training as well was that our mediators didn't know about prejudice in terms of the legal concept of prejudice. So most of the people we worked with had never really used a mediation agreement. And so a mediation agreement is just a simple written document that the participants sign and say that if their dispute goes to court, everything is confidential that happened in the mediation. And so the mediator can't be called to the stand in court to testify. That's what without prejudice means. But without that mediation agreement, there's no protection for the mediator. And it's something that it really pains me when I see people who are really enthusiastic about doing great work and they do fantastic things, and then they end up in a situation where they have to go to court or they're implicated somehow, but they were just trying to do a good thing. So mediation agreements are really, really important. And I think that it's certainly something that should be employed. And then if we're talking about the protection of participants, there are concepts of confidentiality, of client privilege that can be taught. So one example is that when you go into a private session with a participant and you're sort of exploring all the avenues of the dispute, all the sort of angles, and then you go into a private session with the other participant, you need to be careful that when you're reality testing and reframing what that other participant is saying, that you're not revealing some of the things that were disclosed to you in confidentiality. And that can be tricky, and there is a fine line. And I think concepts of confidentiality are essential to the mediation process. And that's why mediation is effective, because it has these tools of confidentiality and client privilege. And we also have this sort of tagline that we always use in our mediation training. And it seems very simple, but it should resonate in every mediator's head. And it's this: listen, 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 don't make things worse. Sounds very simple. But I think that one of the challenges when you're an untrained mediator is saying the wrong thing. And I think when you're taught mediation and you have that formalized training, you learn when not to say certain things. And I think it's difficult because as mediators, we're not trained therapists, we're not sexual assault specialists, we're not specialized in every topic that we work on. But for example, I watched an untrained mediator do sort of a workplace mediation dispute, and he addressed one of the women raised an issue saying that she felt that she was being dismissed, or there was some sort of misogyny in the way that she was being spoken to. And in trying to reality test it, the mediator said something along the lines of, "Oh, but didn't you bring that upon yourself?" And it had a bit of a destructive result in that the women in the group felt smaller, and I could see them sort of shrinking, and the men in the group, their sort of opinions were sort of bolstered, and it changed the dynamic of the mediation. And so I think formalized training just teaches you that if you don't know what to say, you don't have to say anything. You just have to listen, 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 and not make things worse. And I think that is very important for protecting participants, so that certain concepts are not entrenched further through the mediation process. So this isn't just a plug for the Society of Mediators to come to mediation training, but I think I want to highlight that mediation is a very useful tool. And I think that organizations should be investing their time in properly training people who are carrying out mediations and working in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eleanor. Thank you. It's just mediation is used so loosely in so many different contexts, and yet, it's so highly specialized and so needed in so many different ways. Thank you for your presentation. It's actually put it very, very concisely and very interestingly, and we can now see how mediation falls within the umbrella or underneath the umbrella of restorative justice and follows all the principles of restorative justice. I just want to touch on how, in the South African context, there's so much of scope for mediation, especially in what we are facing today. There is loss of trust in government's ability to govern. We have service delivery challenges. We have a lot of political killings in KZN only because there's political jealousies and rivalry. And I think, to use mediation in all those different contexts, even within the university itself, I think there's so much of scope for that. And you've highlighted the need for proper training in this art of mediation. Now, I see it as an art. It's not for everybody. And I think, the person who is the mediator must really have that passion for it and must understand the real issues and listen, as you say. So I think that is key. Thank you very much, Eleanor. Thank you for your presentation and for participating in this webinar today. We now come to the part of the program where I think many participants are waiting for, and that is the question and answer panel. I will hand over to Lisa, who will manage some of the questions, answer some of the questions, and I think that there would be scope for some live questions to be asked and to be posed. So I will open it up now for the participants to pose their live questions once we have addressed all the questions that are on the chat. Thank you very much, Lisa. Sorry,
Hi,
before you go, Lisa. Lisa is part of a community organization called Restore, and I will talk to that a bit later on as well. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for a wonderful, rich afternoon of just hearing from so many voices, including your voices in the chat. So our team, our Restorative Justice Coalition team are on standby as well to answer your chats, and we have been seeing some of your posts, so thank you. We've just had a few comments. There's obviously interest in the presentations that have been presented, as well as slides. So I think if the presenters are open to that, I'm sure that can be made available, as well as any contact information if needed. So thank you for that. We have noted that. And then there have been some comments just around connecting. I see Lebo Molay from DSD is quite keen to connect with some of the presenters as well. So please, we'll take note of that. There's been some wonderful comments around contribution and insight. And then obviously some of the other organizations have also partnered, posted what they are doing in the communities as well, which is wonderful to hear. This is again a space to collaborate and network together. So we will again take note of all the wonderful work that is happening in the communities. Someone has asked, I think specifically to Kalisa and Leslie, if if there is a manual or publication possibly available, perhaps to students that comes from UKZN Edmore and Tini. So Les, there is an email address there. Perhaps perhaps if there is availability to some of the training, or publications you have. Would you like to just comment on that, Les, briefly? Your mic is.
Sorry, I can't get this right. So yes, but it does require, some form of training. This without, the reporting procedures and making sure that the dialogues are conducted in an appropriate manner, we could do a lot of damage. So, we would be very happy to do it, but it would have to come with some form of training as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Liz.
Thank you. We just have a comment here by Olivia Paul, who says, I really like the way you present and differentiate the two concepts in my home country. Main mother tongue, there's not a word to translate mediation, and something it's hard to find the appropriate words to talk about mediation. So perhaps Eleanor or Tamara, if you'd like to comment on that.
Eleanor, do you want to go first?
I agree. I think that mediation culturally is viewed very differently in different places. And mediation in of itself is a very flexible structure. So you have the sort of core tools that you can use, a private session or an open session, and the way that you approach language, open questions, closed questions, but it is a very broad concept. And I think it's helpful to distinguish between a mediation and a dialogue circle, but they are not that too dissimilar. They use a lot of the same principles. And yeah, there are some key differences, but they use much of the same structures in a way. And I know that during our training with Kalisa, I remember talking about private sessions and open sessions, and a participant was like, "Wait, I don't get it. I'm trying to get my head around it." And then when we unpacked it, they'd already been doing open sessions and private sessions, and for their dialogue circles, they'd already been talking to certain groups separately and then preparing them, bringing it together. So yeah, I think it is helpful to try and have a definition so that we can articulate that for other people. But there is no sort of concrete definition.
Thank you, Eleanor. I
Mara?
agree with that. And I also think that what's quite important with regards to mediation is that it's trying to restore something that's been sort of either broken or an issue that's come up. And I think making that the core of it, which trying to restore something, achieve a new outcome, restore a relationship, understand the situation and mediate that problem, that can be used as a vehicle to understand what a mediation is about.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tamar. The next question, we've got a few flowing in now, is just from Matson, who raised an interesting point around just social media. There has been some commentary further down on this, but just some views that could come across really quite harshly towards formerly incarcerated or those inside prison, really where they, the general, they deserve it, or, advocating for extreme violence as well. I'm going to ask Vanessa to just respond on this from an advocacy level. We've obviously heard about community dialogue from Kalisa, but Vanessa is involved in some advocacy work as well. I'd just like her to briefly respond on that.
Okay, thanks, Lisa, and thank you for your question or your comment, Matson. I think we did chat on the chat, but yeah, sometimes the conversation in society can be very punitive, and I think everyone here, we are part of that. That's what this whole colloquium is about, is to really change that narrative when it comes to thinking about crime and conflict. So yeah, so I work for an organization called the Message Trust, and we're also associated with INN, Incarcerations Nations Networks, and we also do a lot of dialogues in community, talking specifically and giving opportunities for formerly incarcerated people to engage with their community. And I think when people hear the stories of what people have gone through, like was mentioned by the speakers, it shifts them in trying to see this person as a human being, and as Les said, what has happened to them. So I think those opportunities are really important, and it fits in with restorative justice of community dialogues, and just so that people would understand, those who are wanting to transform and become part of society again, just to hear them and them being part of the solution. So we've got a long way to go, but I think all of us, each one of us, can make that change towards a more restorative approach. Thank you, Matson, for your comment.
Thank you, Vanessa. And I see a hand as well. Tamara, would you like to add to that?
Yes, I would like to add to that. Of course, we all know the value and the importance and the humanity that is there in correctional facilities, as well as in community engagement for formerly incarcerated individuals. What I also often do when I'm in groups of people who have either differing mindsets or have just not worked in the criminal justice sector at all, and who are sort of trying to understand punishment and how that works together with rehabilitation or doesn't work together, and what we should be focusing on. I also always emphasize the importance for fewer crimes and fewer victims, and that quite often helps to shift some mindsets in a way of understanding that if we support a person in their integration, in their rehabilitation, then we also ensure that we reduce crime, and ultimately we reduce victims and victimization. And that's usually a point where a lot of people start sort of understanding from that point of view, and that's when you can start having a conversation about, well, and also this is why no matter what, these people deserve the support and deserve the chances. But sometimes you just can't go in with all these arguments, although we all know that this is the truth, and we all know that people deserve the chances and support. It sometimes just doesn't work immediately, especially on social media platforms. So trying to direct the attention to something that has a little bit more community buy-in, and then bring it home with the points that we have already, can be something that can be quite useful with regards to advocacy on social media.
Thank you, Tamara. We have another comment and question here from Loreko. We are getting into the national campaign called 16 Days of Activism. What is important to communicate during that time in the context of reintegration of past perpetrators or formerly incarcerated? So would any of the team like to take that? Les, Mike, Vanessa, could I ask one of you to respond? Or any of the panelists, just around communication, around the 16 days of activism, specifically here in South Africa, but maybe relevant to other countries too.
Lisa, I think what's important, as we have heard around the community dialogues and restorative justice, it can be used in any context. So I think it's very important, although it's, I've also worked with mediation in domestic and gender-based violence areas, and they can be a little bit tricky in terms of power issues and all of that. So you've got to understand the dynamics, but there's definitely a place for restorative dialogue. And, because I always believe there's often victims were the ones that, received counseling, not all the time, but the one needs to look at it in a balanced approach in terms of, okay, not just the victimization, but also the perpetration, and to understand where that comes from. Often with violence, we don't really deal with where did the violence come from, where did it start. And I think in terms of those, there's definitely a place for restorative options that would look at the whole picture of gender-based violence and also help to understand in community. I think Les and them do those dialogues with GBV as well. I think we need those where communities can come up with solutions and engaging communities. Though, all of what we've talked about today, I think can be applied to, but I think it's very important. There is a process before, and that means victims need healing and support, and so do those who've committed violence. They also need to go through a process to come to an understanding of their own perpetration, where it started, showing remorse. And, in prisons we do, Lisa's one of them that does restorative processes with those who are in prison, and coming to a sense of their own, understanding their own victimization, but then also, taking responsibility and coming to terms with their crimes and who they've harmed. So it's powerful processes that we can use in GBV as well as with many other crimes. I don't know if anyone wants to.
Yeah, I see Mike's also got a hand up. Thank you, Vanessa. Mike? Mike?
Thanks, Lisa. Just to make a comment about the points in the chat about funding. And it's good to see that it's not only a South African problem. So thanks for that. Is it Masene from the Gambia? And Lebo, I think we can't answer and say, how much and when is mediation happening. It's a challenge. So we have also developed as an adjunct to the coalition, a body to promote the accreditation of training. But you, as aware as we all are of the limitations of funding and capacity. So I think it's as and when it's possible. So, for example, I will be going to Leboa Khomo tomorrow to do some training with an NGO there using some of our lottery grant funding. So it's possible, but it's very limited. So I think that's why we need to build the coalition. That's why we need to build a movement and continually demonstrate the value of restorative justice and incrementally make the case for more funding. I wish there was a shorter, quicker answer to that, but I don't think there is.
Thank you. Hema?
Yes, I just wanted to just pick up on what Vanessa was saying, and with regard to cases of GBV, and this you actually would need to adopt this ecosystem approach, because very often perpetrators themselves have been victims, and I think those cases would really have to be treated with a lot of caution and expertise. So in South Africa, the context that we are in, we have high numbers of offenders serving time for extreme cases of GBV, such as rape. They're serving life sentences for those type of cases. And they would be eligible to go out back into the community. So in those situations, the type of restorative processes are much more intense, and greater amount of work needs to be done on the perpetrators, and not forgetting, what has happened to the victim over all the years while the offender has been incarcerated. So it's quite complex and really needs to be dealt with quite an amount of care and consideration for all the issues around that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to work through what I can here, but if the team could also be perhaps answering within the chat as well, or commenting within the chat, just so we can get through a few more questions. We want to thank you for your engagement, and we do honor the questions that are coming in, but we may not have time for them all, but we will be speaking about ways to engage towards the end of the webinar as well. Quick question here. What is the relation between, from Isa from Zambia, what is the relation between mediation and reconciliation? I'm not sure, Eleanor or one of our mediators want to jump in.
I could just to say that I think mediation is reconciliation. I think quite often when there is a dispute between family members, if we take my example of James and his father, you'll find that what you need to do is remind them that they love each other, or remind them of the relationship that existed before the dispute. And so that for me is where reconciliation comes in, because even though we're centering around a certain issue, it's about repairing that wider relationship. Yeah.
Thank you, Eleanor. Yeah, and I want to jump in and just say, when we speak about restorative justice, we often talk of it on a continuum. So we could have a process of something being fully restorative, but then significantly restorative or partially restorative, and it depends how many stakeholders are involved and if it is direct or surrogate. So just to add to that we may all think the ideal is fully restorative victim offender dialogue, contractual agreements at the end, but actually just perhaps having the family involved, or perhaps just doing a program of awareness in prison. There are elements of restorative justice, and so it falls on a continuum, if you could think of it that way as well, in terms of coming to reconciliation versus different aspects that come into the mix. So yeah, I hope that also just adds to some clarity there. I should not be answering it, or anyone 2 cents. Okay, so the next question: what are the main stumbling blocks to smooth integration for the incarcerated in the correctional facilities and communities in your context? This question goes to Tamara from Brian.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is a great question. And before I answer it, I would like to say that this is a massive, overgeneralization, because every person, every human is different, every case is different. So it's hard to say, if we fix these 3 issues, we will fix reoffending, we will ensure social integration for everybody. So I think that's really important as a disclaimer. But to answer your question, the main sort of issues that people face, from my experience and from the people that I've worked with, have related to employment, housing, and which often is also somewhat interrelated, because if you don't have financial support through employment, you cannot afford your housing. And then relationships, we're talking about any supportive relationships, any absence of negative relationships as well. So being able to identify, okay, which are my supportive relationships, which are the ones that actually bring me back to the cycle of crime, and being able to facilitate the positive relationships, and sort of break up the ones that aren't supportive. With regards to relationships, there also is general stigma. So the stigma can have to do with employment as well. It can be any opportunities that you get after incarceration, any support that you get from your community is also related. So obviously all those three aren't, standalone as such. As you can tell, they're already quite intertwined. I not enjoy, excuse me, that was the wrong word. I like to think that if we could support all of these three parts, then we could really support the social integration of formerly incarcerated individuals. And that's why I always tend to try and focus on what we can do to support that. And from my experiences, that is largely community engagement, making people understand people can change, and showing, as I said earlier, the power of lived experience, using those voices, giving those examples of, people who have successfully broken the cycle of crime, giving them space to express themselves and show, tell people how they've done it. And one of the examples that I've had in a prison that I visited once was the governor, so the head of the prison, was engaging with the community, not only through trying to gain employment for the incarcerated individuals whilst they were within his facility, but also when they were released, he would go with them to different employers and talk to the employers and say, this person has gone through this rehabilitative course, we've supported them, they've worked with our staff, we vouch for them if you give them employment. And it's that kind of community engagement which can really make the difference. And so that's also influencing relationships, isn't it? Because if we can influence the relationships with people around us, with their families, with the supportive employers, then we can give people the opportunity to follow the path of change that they intend to follow. Unfortunately, if we don't give people all of these opportunities that they need, even if you are whatever fully rehabilitated might mean, even if you have all the right intentions and you have worked through your trauma, if you are released and you cannot find employment, your community stigmatizes you and you cannot go and find housing, go and find supportive relationships, then your chances of breaking the cycle of reoffending are really a lot diminished and a lot smaller. And that's why community engagement needs to be at the core of what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. And actually, there's another quick question here from Megan around you discussed trained facilitators. What kind of training have they typically had?
So this is a really good question, but I need to refer to Kalisa for that. So I've been told they've been trained through the Kalisa's initiative with the peace building work, but I've not been explicitly told what kind of training that is. So if I can refer less.
Sure. So the training is all dependent on the level of the beneficiaries or the partner NGOs. We have done extensive training in formal mediations and the different elements that we've shown to, but at community level, our training is more around the dialogue circles, how to report on them, how to make sure that you are able to manage the conflict and be able to report back on it. And most importantly is sustain the dialogue between the individuals. Chris earlier on mentioned to you that he ran some programs during the school holiday programs, and in one of the groups he had 90 children, 100 children, and out of the 100 children, 82% referred to the fact that they were actually victims of GBV. And this is where, you know, you can, you know, really violate individuals' rights by not following up and dealing with that. So that's where you've got to also look at bringing in support structures, having social workers, because our NGOs are not equipped to be able to deal with that. So again, it all depends on the nature of the work, but also being able to draw on proper resources to help you deal with any issues that may be potentially re-victimizing, or also looking at not having the formal qualifications to do proper mediations where you need proper contracts being drawn up. But we do have formal training in all the programs, and it just takes time and mentorship in order to take the individuals to the level where they can operate individually.
Thank you. Hema, how are we on time in terms of questions?
Yeah, I think, you know, we can, yeah, we got about a few minutes and then we can get on to the next part of the program.
Thanks.
Got about 1 or 2 minutes.
Okay, brilliant. So just some quick replies. I think it's just maybe some clarification. Johannes writes mediation as in facilitating the process of restoring something. I'm not sure if we're just clarifying that. Eleanor, any comments there? I'll just read the next one out as well. I think there's just some great feedback from Edmore around an excitement around Leslie and your manual, and really just recognizing that there are mediators and negotiated and committed peacemakers, which we feel this comment's feeling is possibly lacking in society, or perhaps they're out there and we just need to know how to get the next generation excited about this movement. So yeah, so again, that connection, I think there around getting students engaged is an important comment, and Leslie, I'm sure there'll be some engagement after here. So just a comment on mediation as in facilitating the process of restoring something. Eleanor, do you just want to do a 1 or 2 sentence comment? I don't know if it's just a comment here, but just to clarify
I think it might be answering the question from Isa about the relationship between mediation and but I agree. Yes, that's a good point.
Okay. Thank you. Someone's written here from Haiti in the USA. Welcome. It's wonderful to have you here. I serve with an organization that works with Free Methodist Church members in schools, including children, families, and staff. We have a component of RJ in our program in Haiti. We are facing a big challenge with working with the government, because in some areas RJ is seen as working against the law. Can you please share some lessons learned and best practice in this regard? Any of the team would like, or panelists would like to just respond briefly to that?
Mike?
Can we get Mike?
Sure. It's hard to respond without knowing the context of that. Perhaps I would suggest that you look at the UN guidelines and the UN handbook, because that would kind of be the gold standard for integration of restorative approaches into criminal justice systems. And it's certainly not intended as an international movement to be undermining a criminal justice system in any way at all. It's always intended to be complementary and supplementing it.
Thanks, Mike. And that could tie into the next comment as well from Olivia. How can mediators feel that mediation is appropriate within a specific context? And how can we negotiate with the state actors? Mainly because in my own home country's context, the government present themselves as the only actors to settle some type of disputes. Any quick comments on that?
I guess I would just say that it goes back to the communities themselves and talking to the people involved in the dispute, and hearing what they want to get out of the session. Is there a specific goal that they want to get out of it, or is it just that they want to be heard? If it's the latter, then perhaps a dialogue circle, or if it's the former, then structured mediation, but what structure would they like to have? So I guess, yeah, it goes back to talking to the participants and seeing what they would like to get out of the session before you can decide what structural format that will take.
I think we have time for one more question. Thank you, Eleanor. And I mean, there's some wonderful questions there. So the panel will try and just comment in the chats as well. And there will be further discussion as we close, but let me move on. So it says here from Jane Quinn, hi panel, lovely work and sharing all around. Thanks so much. Following on this idea of restoration as healing, becoming whole, I'm interested to hear how you might include critically self-reflective work on the part of the facilitator as much as community members and participants. Les, Tamara, I might have a comment at the end, but anyone want to speak about that in terms of healing, self-reflective work?
Well, from my side, I think, part of the running the dialogue circles and with individuals being able to, follow up and come back again and we go deep and deeper every time we have a different dialogue. So I think opening up the dialogue is a wonderful thing. But Khaleesi's also brought in other tools that we integrate into dialogue circles. We've got appreciative inquiry workshops, we've got role playing, we've got journaling, and this is a whole suite of programs that have been developed especially for school-going children, which we piloted during our school holiday programs. And it was so interesting to see how the children responded by having a place where they could talk about their own inner emotions, and some of them chose to come back with their feedback during storytelling sessions, while others just used it as a tool to actually reflect on what they'd heard and been through. So we, as I said, there's 6 different interventions that are all interconnected, but also provide space for inner processing what they've learned, but also expressing and leading to the development of emotional intelligence, and allowing people to actually get out what's, cough out what's been inside them.
Thank you, Les. Eleanor, just a comment to that?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think a tool that's very useful at the disposal of mediators and leaders doing this sort of work is having a partner. So you've got like your co-mediator with you, and I think it's extremely important that you have a very thorough briefing before and a very thorough briefing after, and that is part of self-reflective work, is saying, oh, do you think I said the right thing here? Could I have approached this differently? What does this say about me? And being that team and doing a co-mediation together, I think that is a very useful tool.
Thank you, everyone. I'll just add to that as well, working in prisons, it's critical that we debrief with our teams and volunteers that are going inside and working inside the prisons as well as in the community. And we actually use the the talking circle or the healing circle, the peace circle, as a tool to debrief with our volunteers. And it's amazing what comes out. We debrief after every session, but we actually debrief once or twice a month as well, to give time to reflect. And it's critical. What comes out from the team is, you're seeing many things that challenge the norms of society, and to find ways to express that is critical. And so self-care in the kind of work is essential as well. Yes, Tamara, final comment?
I would just like to add to that with regards to working in a prison environment, whether or not that is restorative work or working as a prison officer in an aims of rehabilitation, self-reflection and sessions with a mentor are incredibly important. And the Unlock Graduates Leadership Program, which places bachelor graduates as prison officers in prisons in England, does exactly that. So during my time as being a prison officer, I had a 2-year-long mentoring prison officer who was there for one-to-one sessions bi-weekly, and the second week we would do group sessions with the other graduates in the prison to really reflect on systemic issues we might be coming across within the prison, where we're trying to help an individual, but we are facing systemic barriers that we're struggling to overcome. Sometimes also issues with regards to the prison culture, where we're trying to achieve a more positive and rehabilitative culture, but we're coming across some individuals, whether that might be staff or volunteers, who do not have the same approach as we do. And it's about reflecting how we approach these situations. And then thirdly, obviously, working with incarcerated individuals and how, reflecting on our practice and to reduce also not only the damage that the prison does, but also how can we work with the power imbalance that we're working within, because pretending that it doesn't exist is not going to do it any, it's not going to help it at all. But accepting it and then trying to reflect on how we can nonetheless and nevertheless work with the individuals despite the power imbalance or because of it, and see how we can move forward with that is incredibly important. And so I think reflective practice should be at the core of all the criminal justice work.
Thank you, Tamara. I see two more hands and we are closing. Vanessa and Mike, if you have one sentence to add. I also see there's some amazing discussion going on in the chats and references, and Vanessa's been answering some questions there. So do you also just keep an eye on the chats for some of those responses? Vanessa, Mike, any one sentence?
Mike can go first. If there's a chance, I'll say so.
Thanks, Vanessa. I just wanted to draw your attention to something I put in the chat there about structured reflection. There is actually some literature on the subject. I attended a webinar some weeks ago, and that's a particular article that I picked up from that. But if you Google that concept, you should pick up a few other things as well. So just wanted to alert you to that.
Thank you, Mike. Vanessa, one sentence.
Yeah, Shem, I know everybody said it, but I think we also do a carers healing circle, which Lisa and I are part of, and we're really going into our own trauma. So we do deeper work. As we do this work, what triggers us in our own childhood trauma? So I think there's also deeper work to do as we engage these systems and powerlessness and all of that. What does it do to the person? So it's critical that we also begin to heal and engage on that level.
Thank you. Over to you, Hema. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think this was the most exciting part of the program today. I think what we've learned from past colloquia is that there's just not enough time for participants to engage. And so this time round, we wanted that to really open up and have a wider dialogue and discussion. I'm just going to ask Mr. Mike Batley to actually do the quick sum up of today's deliberations. But before I go into introducing Mike Batley, I must apologize. I should have actually told you all something about Lisa and Vanessa. So Lisa is from Restore. She has worked with young offenders for over 17 years in Cape Town's Paulsmoor prison. Her work has been underpinned by a master's in restorative justice, which she obtained from the University of Hull, and a charity called Restore, which she co-founded. Through Restore, they facilitate monthly victim awareness programs. She is a qualified mediator through FAMAC and has conducted research for the Institute of Justice and Reconciliation on intergenerational trauma. Ms. Vanessa Pediachi is from Midway. She has been a social worker working in criminal justice sector for over 28 years. She has a degree in social work, a diploma in human resource management, and a master's in criminology. Her passion is to affirm the dignity and value of every human being despite their circumstances. She is the co-founder of Midway Services Coaching and Mentoring NPO. She's a social work consultant and works in the area of prisons, reintegration, youth at risk, and trauma work and counseling. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Mike Batley, who is going to do the final sum up of today's deliberations. He is a co-founder and director of the Restorative Justice Center, a vibrant multicultural civil society organization. And it is within this context that he has played a pioneering role in bringing restorative justice into the criminal justice system and the public discourse, and in developing associated services throughout South Africa. Mike, over to you.
I think you might be on mute.
Unmute Mike.
Mike, unmute. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about that. So I didn't think that I would need slides, but along the way, I decided that that actually would be useful. So I just have a couple here. We haven't said much about the South African Coalition for Restorative Justice, which is the host of today's event. So that's our logo. A couple of quick reflections that occurred to me during the course of the excellent presentations this afternoon. First of all, in a sense, it was a given, but I think we often overlook the high levels of interpersonal crime. And in South Africa, it's very high, as in many countries. And it's generally around a third of all crime. It goes up and down according to the levels of crime, but it's generally about a third of all crime. So it's very, very significant. And with that, the high level of, let's say the high percentage of parties that know each other. So we're talking in rape, murder, assault, serious assault. It's something like 80 or 90% in all of those offenses that the parties know each other. So obviously, stranger assault and rape and so on is a reality. But by far, the greatest majority of people, or the parties, actually know one another. And I think that it's been touched on indirectly, I think, in the presentations, but that is a reflection of the levels of conflict in families and in communities. So I think that alone indicates why this should be such a priority in terms of reducing crime. What I think also came out very clearly from Leslie Ann's great presentation was the value and role of NGOs as being close to the community, being a bridge between community and government. And with some of the conversation we've been having, the need to build a broad movement advocating for restorative justice, dialogue and mediation that can respond to and challenge the punitive public discourse. So in a sense, that's preaching to the choir, to everybody who's on this call today, because we believe in that. But as some of the comments pointed out, there are so many people who don't. And so we need to shift that public discourse. And I think foundational to that is the need to articulate and demonstrate the values of restorative justice, but especially the concept of human dignity of everybody, which is difficult for people to grasp sometimes in the face of severe crime. But that is one of the foundational values of restorative justice. So a few remarks just about the Coalition for Restorative Justice. As Hema said right at the beginning, this is our third event. So the first one was in 2021, and some of the actions that we've taken since then was to establish a steering committee, which are the people who've been on the panel this afternoon. We've developed a terms of reference along with the neat logo you see there. We've started a database of practitioners and organizations, and we've said that we want to build the coalition. So apart from this annual meeting to commemorate and mark Restorative Justice Week, we would like to have meetings from time to time where we could share information and opportunities and really get to know one another and network. We haven't managed to do any of those yet. We also said that we need to engage the justice, crime prevention and security cluster about how to mainstream restorative justice processes throughout the justice system. Now, we've spoken quite a bit about that, but haven't actually found the best way to start going about that. So those, I think, are the main things that we have been able to attend to over the past 2 years. And so you'll see inherent in that are just some of our limitations. The capacity, there's no separate infrastructure for the coalition. What has happened has been through the volunteer efforts of the steering committee, who are all running their own organizations, as Hema has pointed out. And those realities of running an NGO, are quite harsh at the moment in the harsh realities of our country. So those are the limitations that we are trying to work within, but nonetheless remain absolutely convinced of the need to collaborate and to build this movement. And I think that's come out very clearly this afternoon as well. So I think as a way forward, I know I posted something right at the start of the event this afternoon about an online event that we are having next week, Monday and Tuesday evening, as a general introduction to restorative justice. Lisa, I think you said you have another event as well. Just make sure that you can post that in the event, and that will be a face-to-face event in Cape Town. But if you would like to be part of the database that we have started, if you could post those details in the chat, and I think we'll be able to export the chat and extract the data, the email addresses from that, and add that to our database. I don't know if the panel would like to add anything to that. Those are the thoughts that I thought would be useful to draw together at this point. But so back to you, Hema. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mike. And thank you, everyone. I just want to, it's just that time of the afternoon where I think we've had quite a lively and very, very informative session. But I would just like to say a few thank yous to a few people. This online event, as you know, at UKZN is becoming something of an annual event. A special word of thanks goes to Dean Kalema from the School of Built Environment and Development Studies. Prof, every year, I'm amazed at how committed and enthusiastic you are about restorative justice in all spheres of life. So we have a convert, someone who's converted and come into our family. Thank you to all the speakers and panelists for your participation in today's event and commitment to restorative justice values and practices. A special word of thanks to our keynote speaker, Ms. Tamara Hofer, Leslie Ann van Selm and a team from Kulisa Social Solutions, Mr. Mike Batley for doing the sum up and concluding remarks, Ms. Vanessa Pediachi from Midway, Ms. Lisa Harris from Restore, and Ms. Eleanor Tack from Society of Mediators. To the IT team at UKZN for all the preparation and getting all the troops together and giving us all the information in a timely and accurate way, a huge thank you. And to all participants from far and wide, thank you for your support and see you again next year. Restorative justice as a social justice movement will be a movement for social change. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, and see you soon.